Welcome everyone to a new edition of the Uplink. My name is Travis Alteague, and many of you know me as TT over on our Helium Discord. I serve as developer growth lead over here at Helium, working with building out our developer community. And I also run the weekly Helium Hacks Happy Hour, which Nik has actually been on a few times, talking about his remote gateway builds and installations. So thank you everyone for giving us your time today. This call will be recorded. And so if you have to jump out or want to watch it again, it'll be available on the Helium YouTube in short order. As far as the format today, I'll be doing a very short intro about the Helium network, and then I'll pass the mic over to Nik Hawks, the CEO and founder of Gristle King, and also one of our moderators in the community Discord. So if anyone has questions, feel free to use the chat here in Zoom. And McKenna and others will be monitoring this, and we'll do our best to get them all addressed. And we should have some time left over at the end of this call for kind of a dedicated Q&A session. And if for any reason we're unable to get to any of those, then we'll Nik and I will have our email addresses up and be more than happy to provide answers to your questions. If you want to hit us up, more than happy to talk to you. So let's get started about Helium. We were founded in 2013 with a mission to make it easier to build decentralized wireless networks. We're starting out with LoRaWAN, and we've built out this decentralized network that is owned by the people. And you probably heard the news that we're now moving out into 5G, which is true. And one of the coolest things about the Helium blockchain is that it's agnostic to what radio protocol we're working. What we have built out is LoRaWAN, and that's what we're going to be discussing today with Nik. At this point, it's the largest LoRaWAN public network in the world, which is pretty amazing, considering we've been building this up for just a little over 18 months, something like that. A little bit more about Helium. We've raised about 53 million from investors such as GB, First Smart Capital, Multicoin Capital, USD, and others. And since about October of 2019, we've deployed over 47,000 hotspots. And this is over 5,000 cities, 75 countries. I mean, if you just think about the scope of that for a little bit, it's phenomenal what we've been able to build out. Okay, so if you go to explore.helium.com, this is one of our publicly available resources that we have that allow you to really explore the network. And you can see, if you go down here, how many hotspots that we have on the network. So, okay, I was off. That's the thing about making notes about these presentations. At the rate that we're deploying hotspots, I was already off by almost 1,600, almost exactly 1,600. You can find out information about these hotspots and see exactly what rate these are coming online. And so just in the last 30 days, we've had over 17,000 hotspots come online, which is awesome. On the hotspot map, and this is very cool, you can open this up and search for a particular hotspot. And it's interactive, you can zoom in and kind of see what your coverage layout looks like. We have an associated site, which is a little different. And this is our site that gives you your main coverage. Go over to mappers.helium.com, and this is a very cool project that Kent over at Helium has put together with the help of a number of community members. And what the site allows you to do is see feet on the ground coverage mapping, coverage that has been validated by using devices that we call mappers. And these are small devices that are easily built up. And if you have interest in this, please check out the coverage mapping channel over on our Discord. If you do not have a Discord account, I would heavily recommend you picking one up. That's gives you the opportunity to speak with developers, with other community members, with people who are very involved in what we have going on. And so all of this coverage, although Houston has quite a bit more coverage around here, all of this has been validated, by some type of device such as this, the Glamos, or smaller devices that you can very cheaply build and drive around and war drive the coverage, real world coverage in an area. And so it's fantastic. You look at these different cities and some of the coverage mapping that has gone on. This is Austin. And we can see that there are a lot of hotspots here that are still providing coverage, but haven't actively been mapped. And so you have to understand that this is not going to be a full picture, but it is truly amazing some of the community members who have gone through and, spent the time war driving to, I mean, this is LA, which is a huge sprawl, but the teams that have been going around and mapping this. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop my sharing here. And so all of the APIs that these are built around are completely public, and we encourage developers to jump in, build your own projects. There are so many third-party projects that have been built up recently. Like, just to name a few, there's another mapping project called Helium Vision that I would highly recommend checking out. I know Nik, has been working, with the folks over there, with Nik over there, and we encourage everyone to participate in this community, jump on Discord, meet some people, and get involved. As far as the continued growth and expansion of the network, we have a number of third-party gateways that are available through a number of manufacturers. And if this is something that you would like to be a part of, we have something called HIP19 that allows you to, get the ball rolling to become a manufacturer if you want to build up a gateway for the Helium network. So please check that out. But at this point, I've been talking too long. I want to go ahead and pass the mic over to Nik. Nik Hawks, CEO and founder of Gristle King. Nik, thanks for joining us today, man.
Rock and roll. Thanks for the intro. McKenna, if you want to start on that Gristle King slide. So what we'll do today, just in big, is we'll go through kind of how I found Helium, a couple of installations, couple of services and projects that Gristle King does, and then some resources you can use as a hotspot owner to maybe improve your hotspot placements, optimization strategy, all that stuff. So we'll start off. Next one, McKenna, is I found Helium through paragliding, which is pretty funny. You wouldn't expect to find it that way. Paragliding is what you're looking at on the screen here. So it's it looks like a big parachute. You hang under it in a harness. You launch off of a mountaintop usually, and then we'll ride thermals going up. Usually you'll see us kind of spinning up in thermals, just like Hawks. When you get to the top of the thermal, you go on glide and you find another one, and you keep doing that as many times as you can until the day ends. And so right now, like the record for that is something like 250 miles in the US. So in August of this year, and we can go down the next slide, McKenna, thanks. Yep, so that's what a paraglider looks laid out. This is actually after a night spent on a mountain. So the kind of coolest thing that I think you can do with a paraglider is fly over to a mountain, spend the night on top of it. There may be no trails to get there, but you can fly in and land, and then the next day you fly off. And so that's my wing laid out over one of the local valleys after a night spent on the mountain. So pretty cool. So all that sounds super awesome and fun, but in the next slide, you'll see kind of where it went wrong is that back in August, one of the better paragliders in the world was making an attempt to set a personal best out in Nevada. Nevada is pretty hot conditions, so really rough, really turbulent. You can go really big distance there, but it's also can be dangerous. And in this case, he was carrying what we consider at the time the gold standard for tracking, which is a GPS and a cell phone. He went missing at about 14,500 feet on August, maybe 26, something like that. He was really well-known paraglider, so the paraglider kind of community around the world rallied and went out to find him. And so I flew up there in a small plane with a buddy. We probably had 30 aircraft up there throughout the course of the search, which took us 30 days. Mountain bikes, quads, dirt bikes, hikers, hunters, passerby. We had this kind of little town in Nevada around where he disappeared, plastered with flyers. Didn't find him for 30 days. And that led to this idea that on the way up and on the way back in the plane ride, he was dead when he hit the ground. So it didn't matter that it took us that long. And it's tragedy, but that's how it goes. Is on the plane ride up and down, I was talking to my co-pilot or the pilot, and we were saying, how would we want this to roll out or to change for us, right? If we start doing these big flights, how do we make sure that we're tracked? And so one of the things that came up as we began that search for trackers alternate to GPS was LoRaWAN. And as I looked into LoRaWAN, I saw that there was this kind of cryptocurrency component to Helium. I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And that led me down the path of finding Discord and connecting in with a community and seeing like, what could I do and how could I build this? And probably like a lot of you look on the map, you're like, oh, is this real? And you see some hotspot next to you. And this is exactly what happened to me. And it was making a ton of HNT, and you translate the HNT into dollars and you make your own decisions. So on the next slide, we'll see this is the very first hotspot that I put up. This is on my roof with my buddy. And we put this thing up just to see what would happen. It turned out to be an amazing placement. And that was more or less by accident. It's not like I moved my house to get this. I just did the best I could with what I had. At the time I was building DIY stuff. So that was when that program was open. That's been closed for a long time. is kind of exploited heavily by gamers, so they closed it, but I got lucky enough to get in there early and kind of built my own, and that was a super big learning experience. And the next slide is you'll see kind of a similar thing. This is another one I put up. So I got on this roll where I was just putting up more and more hotspots and learning each time how to put them up better, how to make the whole process more efficient, what tools to buy, what equipment you needed, the type of cable you wanted, why you wanted this and not that, how would you connect all this stuff. Like as you do more and more reps of this stuff, you just get better at figuring it out. And so then I came on next slide. I was like, oh, it's got to be the antenna. That's got to be the secret. So I bought this giant antenna off the internet and figured like, okay, I've got this mountain placement from my paragliding connections. I'd put a weather station up on this mountain the year before. We'd helicoptered in a weather pole. It was this giant production. So I had this kind of big bare pole with a tiny weather station on top of it. I thought that would be an excellent placement for this giant antenna. And so in the next slide, you'll see that here's the inside of that thing. So I kind of built it out. You can see a solar charge controller, and that thing on the top right is actually what your hotspot looks like if you pulled it out of the rack enclosure. Don't do that. That'll void the warranty, but that's what it looks like on the inside. There's a giant battery in there. On the left side, you can see this modem that provides cellular backhaul because all hotspots need to be connected to the internet and power. So that's kind of the off-grid package that we came up. And then we had to hike it in. It was 6 miles down this pretty rugged mountain road. We started at 6 in the morning. Next slide, you can see me and my buddy hiked all of this stuff in. I mean, you can see how big that antenna is. It was a big pain in the butt. The antenna's, I don't know, it's light, but it's almost as tall as I am. And you can see I used this Paraglider pack to hike it in. So it was off center the whole time. It was a pretty difficult hike in, but at the bottom right picture, you can see there's me standing up next to this thing. And that was actually, I think, Travis, one of the first shared video things that we did was I was building that thing in the backyard, and you guys are like, what is going on there?
Exactly. I think you just came on Hacks, and people started throwing questions your way. So
yeah. Yep. So from there, I just kind of kept on doing it, and I started getting requests for help with it. So if we go to the next one over, McKenna, you'll see just the GKI work that has been done so far. So whether it's on an office building or on top of my little bakery, my wife and I have a cookie company that we make cookies at, and we decided to see what can we do with Helium to manage and measure inventory. So how much honey do we have? How much cacao butter? Can we hook in those scales to the Helium network? And so far it's working. In fact, we'll hit this at the end, but Helium's doing some super cool things. Travis is printing 3D parts for basically any Helium project, as I understand, as long as it's Helium related. You can line this thing up and he'll spit out the parts and print them to you. So I got some of the feet for these scales that we're going to use for inventory management there. And just kind of kept on doing more and more stuff. And this kind of brings us full circle back to paragliding sensors. So we'll go down one, and that's what the sensor looks like. In fact, I'll hold it up. I got one here on the desk. This is an Oyster. You can get them from a bunch of different aftermarket parties. You can buy them direct if you want to set up your own account, but it'll allow you to track paragliders over really long distances. So I bought a couple of them. I started putting them on my buddies. We'll drop down to the next slide, and you can see that they're kind of resolution, what it might look like. So this is one of my buddies driving out to different paragliding sites and flying around and then driving back. This is San Diego. The whole spread of the map is probably, I don't know, 80, 90 miles from top to bottom. So you can see that this is being tracked by the Helium network across this really wide expanse. I mean, San Diego County is one of the largest counties in the US, and we're tracking throughout the county. So it's pretty cool to see what this stuff does. To give a little bit of color about what paragliding is, actually, I'm going to share my screen and I'll give you a super fast demo of what a paraglider looks like. This is just going to be a real short clip. You can watch this movie if you want. It's a free movie on Red Bull, the Rocky Mountains Traverse, but we'll get a quick image of what it looks like when a guy launches off a mountain. So these two guys flying up in the Rocky Mountains, and it's super basic. You pull your wing up, you turn around, you run off, and you're flying. And that's it. That's one of the better paragliders in the world. His name's Gavin McClurg. He did this rad trip with another guy named Will Gadd, and they flew to 700 kilometers down the Rockies. So that's kind of what paragliding is. To give you an idea of kind of what it looks like right now, I'll run this sim at 128 times speed so that you don't have to sit through an entire thing. But this is like a standard paragliding milk run locally here in San Diego. We launch on one side of the valley. And this is not using Helium. This is using something else. So this is what I wanted Helium to be the backup for. You see, I just went in circles, rode up this thermal, crossed the valley. It's a couple miles, rode up in circles on the far side, riding a thermal, came back down the ridge and back to where I started. So that's like a straightforward milk run. That whole thing takes like 30, 40 minutes to do, depending on how long it takes you to get to the other side. And that's like what pretty much any paraglider can do. If we go out to kind of getting closer to the edge of the possible, I'll run this at 256 because it's way faster. Here's a group of paragliders in San Diego going up. You can see every time they're spinning, they're riding thermals and going up. You see how that happening? These are 3 of our best local pilots. And on this day, they went from kind of the backcountry of San Diego and set an extra cross-country record and went, I think, all the way out to Hemet. So you can see they're covering massive ground. I'm not sure if you can see it on the top right, but we're running 20 to 30 miles an hour on these things. That's without a motor. You're just riding, basically riding the wind. So going up as high as you can and then going on glide and doing that, as you can see, over and over and over again. And so there's a lot going on there, but that just gives you an idea of how far these things can go. Right now, their distance, they've gone 73 miles. I think by the end of this, I don't know, they probably did 100, maybe a little bit more than that. So that's kind of the scope of what paragliders can do, and a pretty cool thing that we can start tracking with Helium. And that's really what got me into the whole Helium thing, is like, hey, we've got a primary solution that works pretty well. We can visualize it, when it works well. But what happens when it doesn't work well? How do we have a tertiary, a third backup after GPS and cell? And that was what became super important. Yeah, so that's kind of the super broad strokes on the GKI stuff. Dig it. So what I ended up doing out of all of that, like that kind of all of that happened over, let's say, the last 8 months, is at some point people started asking me a bunch of questions. What are you doing with Helium? What is Helium? What's going on? Like, how does this whole thing work? And then people who are setting up hotspots had seen that I'd set up a bunch of different hotspots, whether they're on someone's house or on a commercial building with a flat roof or way out in the mountains. And they started asking for help. And at first, just like everyone, you're like, oh, let me help as much as I can. But I started getting phone calls at 9 o'clock at night. My favorite one was this Ukrainian guy in Buffalo, New York. It's like, hey, I have a large deployment I would like to talk to you about. And it's like, holy smokes, like I better be careful about this, and he turned out to be totally rad. It was like this funny kind of Russian mob moment. But I realized, okay, I can either keep doing free advice and basically abandon the rest of my life and watch that whole thing burn down, or I can build a business around this and I can help people and then charge what it kind of takes to do that. And that's what I did. So now Gristle King gets born. It was kind of came out of the Kick 13 website. So kyk13.com was where I was writing about Helium and writing about how you optimize your hotspot and why you should pick this antenna or that antenna, or why antennas don't matter, or how to think about strategy, both for like a small hotspot placement just on your roof, like how you make it the best you can in your house, or if you've got 50, or we got one client right now, it's got 500 to deploy. How do you pattern those 500 to get your best earnings and to provide the most coverage? And at the end of the day, the answer is always providing wide, unique, provable, and useful coverage, which I've written a little bit about. But that's kind of the big picture, is that a lot of the questions you guys have stem around, how do I make my hotspot earn the most HNT possible? And it's always in the long term going to be making sure you're providing as wide as coverage as possible. That coverage is unique. It's not the same as another hotspot. It's like 2 hotspots right next to each other, that coverage is provable so it can hear and be heard by other hotspots. And that finally, in the long term, that coverage is useful, that it's actually passing data that's pumped out by sensors. So thanks for the mullet props. It's funny. My wife's an artist. She's like, hey, can I give you a haircut? And this is what I got. So I call this like the $6,000 mullet. Cool. I'll give it a pause there. McKenna, you want me to kind of read through these comments, or Travis, you have a direction you want to go? I've got a couple of things I can share, but I want to.
Yeah, we can hit comments, but I've got a couple questions. I mean, you released a guide called kind of the rough guide, right? Mm-hmm. Which allows people to, get some advice on hotspot placement, best practices, I guess is what you would call it. Yeah. And if someone wants to go out and place a hotspot, I think a lot of people have the misconception that you have to put just the most expensive, highest gain antenna on it that you can find. And that's not necessarily the case, right?
Not even close, no.
Yeah. And so it's something that there's a lot more research that really has to go into, your placement in order to optimize your, I guess, HNT earnings off of these. So that guide is available though, over on your site.
Yeah.
If someone wants to take a read, and you published a number of articles about Helium recently.
Yeah. So what I've been trying to do is take the journey that I've been on and help people with it. So if you're going on that same journey and you just found Helium and you want to figure out how to skip past a bunch of mistakes, that was what I wanted that blog to be able to do. And I looked at it in 2 ways. I wanted all of the information, I thought about it. I want it to be kind of open source, so that if you want to do it on your own, you want to read all this stuff, you want to go through some of the gear lists I provide, you can do it. That's rad. It'll probably take you more time to do it that way, but there's nothing like hidden in there. There's no top secret things. Or the other way that I do it is, that's the business, is like, hey, if you want to read or if you want to learn all of that stuff in about an hour, I'll walk you through all of it. We'll skip past the stuff you already know. We'll dive into the stuff that you don't. And at the end of the hour, maybe hour and a half, you know as much as you need to do the kind of best placement possible, whether that's a single placement on your house, maybe kind of friends and family, or some larger pattern deployment. And so that's
Absolutely.
how I wanted to work. It was to make it available to everyone. And for people who wanted to learn fast, it's just the price of the session.
Because really the commitment comes down to the time put into it. I mean, I think that's the greatest commitment. And if you can shave that time off, then you're going to save yourself not just headaches, but, you know, in the end, quite a bit of money. So
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what we're seeing. I mean, a lot of this stuff is, some of it is super simple and straightforward. I think everyone can understand, you know, a radio broadcasts out energy, and maybe it does it in a certain pattern for different antennas, but there's some
right.
complexities to it. You get into HIP 15 and how those variables work and where you should or shouldn't be and what the impact will be if you're in your house, even like 50 meters away. Those can have a pretty big, you know, impact on your and other people's earnings. So helping us all understand, like, how do we all build this network together? How do we all work together to do a good job? Because one of the very coolest things about the network is it's really set up for all of us to work together kind of in parallel and not really have to compete. And that's amazingly awesome.
Very true. Very true. But yeah, let's jump on some of these other questions.
Sure.
Let's see.
I could geez, start at the beginning. We have to scroll
Yeah.
way back. Cool.
Apparently my internet is awesome today.
So I'll start with this JL of the antenna setup. So some of those setups are really good, right? And as Travis was saying, there's pretty big differences in antennas. And if we think about, we'll just do it at a super basic level. If you've got like a zero gain antenna, it's got this kind of globe perfect pattern as if it's omni antenna, right? And so it should, in theory, have this perfect globe pattern. As you go up in gain, what happens is that pattern gets kind of squeezed and drawn out, kind of like a donut. And so it's possible to shoot over the top of hotspots, or, you know, if your antenna is swaying in the wind, those two globes or those two kind of bands that are coming out can go up and down and you can miss stuff. What I'm seeing with helium and with antennas is that it kind of hurts me to say it, but basically the antenna doesn't really matter. Right. There are a few cases where it does. There's this one antenna on the market that's a multi polarized antenna, and in urban environments that can hear a couple more witnesses than you might get with a vertically polarized antenna. But that's kind of getting into the weeds a little bit. For the most part, if you've got the stock antenna or a standard 5.8 or that H antenna, the one that's multi-polarized, those will all do really, really well. The only time you need to get into really specialized antennas if you're doing kind of crazy setups where your nearest hotspot is 5 or 8 or 13 miles away. And then it starts to make sense to say, okay, I'll do a directional. I'll make sure that I'm hitting in these certain directions. And especially if you've got a mountain behind you. In one of the slides I showed that the antenna is halfway up the mountain. So it's fine to do a directional because all the energy that would be going into the back would just be getting absorbed by the mountain.
Yeah.
But for the most part, like that's one of the most common questions, like what antenna should I get, is you can start with a stock and be fine. And you can spend 35 to 150 bucks and you'll have, you know, depending on what your budget is, they'll all perform pretty close to the same. Right. And that's kind of the heartbreaker to hear, because you want to be able to spend more and earn more, but it's not this enormous advantage to having wildly different antennas. Travis, you want to jump in on that and add anything?
No, I think you nailed it there. One thing I would add is that you're using two different types of antennas, because on a lot of these deployments, you're actually using some type of cell or LTE backhaul. So
Yep. Yeah, that's a good point. So it kind of goes back to the initial piece with finding and tracking paragliders, is that helium hotspots need access to the internet. So whether you provide that with an Ethernet cable or Wi-Fi or these cell backhauls, they still need to be able to see the internet. And so cell backhaul is kind of the best way to do that. Is if we imagine it at really basic level, it's like taking a cell phone and plugging your helium hotspot into that cell phone. But there's still limitations. If there's no cell signal, you can't rebroadcast anything because there's nothing to connect into. And so thinking about how would we do this for an adventure race, is we'd have to put our helium hotspot in a place where it could get cell signal and maybe track into places that don't have cell signal. And that's, you know, that gets into like network topology and getting kind of geeky super fast.
Or using repeaters or some method to actually, you know, sometimes you just need to get over a mountain. And, you know, being able to repeat over that just using LoRaWAN. I mean, that's something that's entirely possible, but kind of out of the scope of, you know, what helium, you know, is currently doing, but absolutely doable on the helium network. So,
yeah. That's the cool thing is that, the fundamental piece of LoRaWAN is that it's near line of sight so that you can, if you can almost see it, you can hit it. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the same way we see these satellite companies coming up where they're supporting LoRaWAN. And
Yeah.
I mean, you have Windows, using these services, but it does give you effectively a very, very large coverage range. Like what's been said, when you're up on a
Mhm.
paraglider, I mean, if you want to, if you bring a gateway with you up there, for example, I mean, everyone is going to be able to witness you while you're in the air, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a pretty rad thing. And we kind of make these switches from like, okay, what's the highest earning to the most useful? And in certain cases, it's much more important to me to be super useful than to be higher earning. So that's
Of
kind of cool.
course. Of course. And that's something that, we have with these new light gateways that are out.
Yep.
I mean, with like hazmat, with rescue, there's so many use cases for LoRaWAN that you're not concerning yourself with how much am I going to make off of mining when I'm doing this operation. And, some of these like the Dragino gateways that are available that you can get for, I say next to nothing, but like, under $120 that give you incredible like logging insight into what's going on the gateway. And so which is very useful when you're doing, operations such as this, when it's not important. And you can battery power these. I know we've talked about this, Nick, running gateways completely off of battery power, being able to throw these into like a weather tight case that
Yep.
you can just throw in the back of your truck and take with you. And, you're not going to spend the time geo asserting these because you can't geo assert to your truck. So,
Right. Right.
But they still will operate as long as they're up to chain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just
Reporting
like
and
anything else. Yeah.
super, super cool. Let's see. So I'm seeing in the questions, one thing that I see all the time consulting wise is the privacy piece. And I don't think I'm going too far off track with this, but what I tell people is that within 50, 100 meters of wherever your actual location is, I feel like for me, that's fine to assert there for privacy. So I usually tell people if you live in the suburbs, just assert it to the nearest intersection. And that gives you enough privacy. And it also is still kind of reporting where you are so that you're not getting dinged on some of the anti-gaming stuff. I don't know, Travis, if that's kind of the official line, but that's certainly the Gristle King line.
No, I understand that. And I think that's, obviously privacy is first and foremost in a lot of people's minds. And that's also something we're addressing on the Helium side of things, where
Yeah.
On maps that are publicly displayed, if you've noticed, a lot of the specific information is fuzzed out, where you're not going to get the specific hotspot location info that you did at some point. Of course, all of this is on the blockchain. And that's part of the double-edged sword in order for this to work and to be able to minimize gaming, to have 200 hotspots in your basement. Right. And just be able to basically steal, H&T generation off of the network and everyone else who's running valid located gateways.
Yep.
We do need to, be able to know roughly where you're at. And so that's something that is very serious to us here at Helium, and we're trying to minimize that risk as much as possible. So.
Yeah. Dig it. I'm seeing there's some other folks on here tracking, looks like sailplanes. So that's rad. Reach out. If there's anything I can do to help you, I will. One of the questions was about the Oyster, and it says you need a SIM card and it needs a cell network. As far as I know, it doesn't. This actually just came to me totally sealed. There's nothing to put into it. There's nothing to take out of it. It's always on. And what it's using is the Helium network. So I think you've got some options where you can use Helium and GPS. You can use a couple different things. But the ones I'm running and Travis jump in are just on Helium.
They have different models. And so, yeah, they do have cellular oysters. They have a number of different lines. They have oysters, guppies, yabbies,
yep.
A number of different, some are smaller than the oysters. The oysters are solid.
Yeah.
I've had one in my car for like a year and a half and it works great. They're made by a company, Digital Matter.
Yeah.
And they have a very thorough website if you want to go through and look at all the models. But no, they do have LoRaWAN only models that I believe that's what Nick's using here. So
yeah, I'm going to share my screen again. I got a question about how do you get it up on a building? And so this is a common question is like, how do you talk about Helium to people and how do you talk about these Helium hotspots? And so this is one of the things I share with clients. You guys can kind of look at, I'm not sure how easy it is to read. I'll try and make the font a little bit bigger. But what I end up talking about with building owners is the kind of two most boring things in the world, which are IoT and LoRa. And as soon as they see like it's a radio thing and it's tracking IoT, most of them just want whatever the rental fee is, right? So you're going to say, hey, I'll pay you X amount of dollars per month just to have 6 square feet up on your roof. You'll run that same setup that I showed before, where it's a little like a base with a pole going up to it and guide out with a couple wires. And that's probably the most per square foot that building owner will ever make, unless it's in New York. So it's just a template. You're just talking about the things that it does. I typically don't talk about Helium or cryptocurrency because both those things to me kind of confuse the whole conversation and they go into a much deeper thing. I just want it to be like a business transaction where it's like, hey, this is what I would like to get, is I'd like to get some space on your roof, access to power on the internet. And here's what you're going to get, which is whether it's money or inventory tracking or whatever. Like at the bakery I'm doing it, one of the things is like, hey, let's see if we can get the other bakeries that are in that building to also use this. And if they need to use it for inventory management or whatever it is, like, let's figure out how to get them to use the Helium network as well. So that was one of the questions I saw. And I've got this template. It may be linked on the blog, or it may just be in the consulting sessions only, but certainly out there.
But when you mentioned the bakery, I mean, that's something that anyone nearby probably, has access through your gateway.
Yeah.
Through the Helium network. Another question that I hear come up time and time again: how do you deal with lightning arresters and grounding?
I keep this sucker on my desk just so I can show people what it looks like. So here's our little lightning arrestor. There's a proxy cache. So you can get a bunch of different kinds. Basically, it plugs in on one side to the antenna, and on the other side, it goes out to the antenna cable. This thing in the middle is got a bunch of gas in it, and that gas transmits, I'll do this in non-engineering talk, transmits energy from one side to the other. If there's too much static electricity, I mean, a direct lightning strike is just going to blow the house up. This is going to stop that. But if there's too much electricity that comes through, it ionizes the gas, it breaks that connection chain between this side and this side. And then all that extra energy goes out through this guy, which is a little lug that goes out to, I think, 10 gauge wire and goes to your pole, down your pole, and you attach that to the building ground. That's the right way to do it. It's pretty straightforward. Like, it makes a lot of sense, but it can be an extra pain in the butt to do. But that's how to do lightning arresters.
I'm glad that you said that if you get hit by a direct strike, I mean, you don't expect this to cover anything. I mean, you just don't want the building to burn down at that point. I mean, it's, but you do get this ionization building up in the atmosphere during a storm, and that will absolutely collect into your system if you're not grounding out properly. So it is important to do, not just in case you get hit by lightning. And I think that's kind of a misconception some people have.
Yeah, super good point. Teo Tiger, exponential network growth impact, expected impact on HNT mining. Like, everybody wants to know how much HNT they're going to mine. I mean, I look at this as, hey, there's two numbers you're pretty sure of. We're pretty sure there's at least 200,000 hotspots going to be on the network by December. And we know that the halving is going to happen in August. So if we've got 50,000 on the network right now, that's a quarter of what's coming. So earnings are going to be 25% at a minimum. And then that's going to get multiplied by 0.5 for 50% halving. So whatever your earnings are today, they're going to be 12.5% of that in December. Now that's my super fast math. That's not a guarantee. If you've got a higher earning hotspot, it'll do better. If you have a lower earning hotspot, my guess is that the lower earning hotspots that are kind of stuck down in the basement where someone didn't care about it, they're probably going to earn way less than that. And we're going to see this reward system kind of shift to say, hey, if you're providing good coverage, we really want to reward that. And if you're providing really crappy coverage, we want to disincentivize that. That's my guess, though. That's not the official Helium position. As humans, with the advent of IoT, this is the first time in about 10,000 years that we will have so much information about the environment. And it'll be the first time ever that we know of where you've been able to share that information with everyone else. So if you go back 10,000 years and you talk to a hunter-gatherer, they're going to know everything that was going on around them. Like, oh, a deer slept here last night. There's a rabbit 60 feet that way. There's a fox behind me, because they can smell it. They can feel it. They can, list, like, all of those things. We've lost a lot of those senses. And IoT is bringing a lot of that back, and it's bringing it back from the modern world, not in the sense of where foxes and rabbits and bears are, but in the sense of where all the things that we have invented and how are they working? How are they being used? And this huge advance in kind of capability comes from being able to share that information. So you don't need to spend a lifetime learning how to track a fox, is that you can get online and see, like, okay, this is how foxes or whatever it is are tracked. This is how you weigh honey. This is how much honey is everywhere in America, because all the honey people are weighing all of their honey, or whatever it is, whether you're weighing a honeybee hive or a bucket of honey for ingredients. Like, we are entering this phase of human kind of existence where we have this amazing connection to tons and tons of information. And so learning how to use that and how to understand that is going to give you as an advantage if you're looking for a job, or it's just going to give you a better, deeper, richer view of the world. And it's a super cool time to be alive.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And that's something that we've kind of promoted with integrations on the Helium console side.
Yep.
So if you want to integrate with AWS, Amazon IoT Core, it's almost a one-click integration. And then at that point, you have access to all of these big data providers. You have access to all of these services via AWS. Most everything can be done, or at least tried out, on their free tier. And so you can run all sorts of machine learning against your sensor readings, against these huge data sets, and come up with models that can then be pushed down, to the edge and operated on with the system that you're using locally. And so just the power that gives you is phenomenal.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool time to be alive.
Hell
Okay,
yeah. Hell yeah.
let's see, what information can you give us about the big problem with hotspot manufacturers right now? Which one is the best one to get? So, super common question. There is no best one. They're all the same as far as I know. They've got different specs. So you've got to decide, like, okay, do I really want this type or that type? Do I want indoor, outdoor? Do I want this, whatever, antenna on a cable? Like, those might make a difference, but in general, they're all built to the same kind of standard. And that's what they'll do as far as earning HNT and broadcasting and receiving and proving coverage is going to be the same. So when we think about, like, why is it happening, is there's a bunch of different factors. As we went through this pandemic where everybody's on computers, everybody's at home. So there's this massive kind of demand for chips. People are not at the factory making chips, so that exacerbates it. And then we've got, coming out of that, it takes a while to get through those bumps. So these things are not, it's not like the manufacturers are sitting on their hands and be like, oh, we'll just let the price go up. Like, from what I've seen on the warehouse, they're busting their butts to get these things out the door in good condition as fast as possible. So we can expect that to ease, in the next couple months probably, but it's not something that anyone is kind of purposefully doing. And as far as I can see, and I totally believe this is true, like, there's no one that's saying, like, hey, let's just do a crappy job of manufacturing these things and going really slow. Like, that's not what businesses do, right? They're like, how do I produce the fastest for the most people? Because that's what drives business. So yeah, it can go
industry wide, and so this is affecting all manufacturers.
Yeah,
and they're not in collusion here. That's not what's going on. I mean, there were also disasters like fires, that you have to take into account here. So I don't think it's a big conspiracy. And you look at it, it's not just about Helium or LoRaWAN either. It's this is industry wide with electronic component shortages.
Oh yeah, auto manufacturers having the same problem. This is not like we're a small fish in a pretty big pond. As funny as that sounds. Okay, is a cell backhaul better than, say, a cell hotspot? They're just two different things that do it two different ways. And the way I understand it is that when we're looking at cell backhaul and you want something that is super reliable and ruggedized, you're going to go with like basically a purpose-built unit. If you're going with like a hotspot that you would normally carry around the city, it's just not going to be built for that same thing. It's not going to be as rugged. It probably won't last as long. It's more for kind of consumer use and not from industrial use. Yeah. Plug for Discord is that, that's where I learned a ton of stuff. Is you can travel all over the internet, but usually there's experts on there who will answer most of your questions right away. So the Helium Discord is pretty amazing. Matthew, have you connected or deployed any other interesting sensors that you'd like to tell us about? Typically on every one that I do, every hotspot I deploy, I'll put in a Dragino LHT 65, which is temperature and humidity. And I put that because that's just like, it's a check on whether the hotspot is working. Is that if that thing is pushing out data and my hotspot is processing it, then it doesn't really matter if Explorer is behind or if my app is behind saying that something is going on. I know that data is coming through there. So for me, it's a check, and data is so cheap that it doesn't matter. Other stuff we're looking at is like, how do you measure we're doing these deployments for this air park, which is a paragliding, like a place where we fly paragliders, is how do we track their little Kubota? So vehicle tracking. How do we figure out how much propane is in their propane tank? Because they're not off grid, but they're definitely outside city limits. How do we check if someone has come through the gate or not at night? They usually leave for the summer. So when they're gone for the summer, can we tell them, like, yeah, vehicle just came through your gate. Maybe you should turn the cameras on, or you should boogie back there, or send someone over there to check things out. So it's a lot of this stuff is just, it's driven by what people want. You want to know if your door or window has been open. So we can do security stuff. We can do tracking of kind of anything that's out there. And that's the really exciting part, is that, there's this balance right now between most of this stuff is available. It's not right now available where you pull it out of the box and it works right off the bat. It does take a little bit of tweaking, but that's what's super fun about the whole thing, is figuring out how do we customize it for whatever deployment you want, whether that's tracking people, vehicles, temperature changes, whatever, weather station, etc. There's a lot of different things you can do. Let's see, backhaul idea, point-to-point kit, good low-cost option. Yeah, there's like a million ways to do this backhaul stuff. Is at the end of the day, you just want to think, you want to connect your hotspot to the internet, and whatever the most appropriate way to do that is for your installation, that's how you have to do it. So if you're on a remote mountaintop and you've got to, bounce across a couple different points to get there, like, okay, that's going to cost more to set up. If you're on a house in the suburbs and there's plenty of hotspots around you, hardline in the Ethernet, you don't have to worry about backhaul at all. But
yeah, there's this next question. It's kind of long here, but they're talking about security of the data going over the, like, how do I limit the view of my sensors to, so everyone else can't see your data? This is all encrypted. So no one else is going to be able to, if they're not a part of your integration or your application, part of your organization, if you don't want them to have access to your data, they don't have access to your data. So even though it's a public network, your private data over the public network is private to you.
Yep. So I think they can see that the data packets have been transferred, but they can't see what's in them. Yep. So it's just like the mail. Like, you can see someone's envelope, and in this case, you can see the address it's going to, which is somewhere on the blockchain, but that's about it. What's the biggest range error for asserting? I mean, I wouldn't do it more than 100 meters. I'm going to try and keep it under 50. Like, keep it as close as you can and still give yourself privacy. That's what I say, right? That's the best thing. Where can you buy Paraglider sensors? I got these off of, I bought them just from Lone Star Tracking. I wanted something that would work really well, that I didn't have to do a bunch of coding or tweaking to do. It's a little bit more expensive sensor wise, but it's still like, I mean, a GPS, I've got a little Garmin GPS, is about $350 to buy. And then it's, I don't know, 20 to 30 bucks a month. These are more like under 100 to buy the sensor, sometimes cheaper, and under, I don't know, 10 bucks a month to track, and pretty much well under. I don't want to dance into their pricing thing, but it's yeah, definitely under 10 bucks. So
I see there was a link to the Lone Star Tracking here, but I believe that was to the LTE model. Just call them. They're very nice folks over there. So.
Yep, super good. Where can we get more info about multipolarized LoRaWAN antennas? I just use the H antenna. So it's like HNT antenna, hantenna.com. You can get them there. Yeah, that's the easiest way. Those are made in America, made in Ohio. That's what I'm using on all my stuff going forward. But again, like, those are 150 bucks. That's probably the most you want to spend on an antenna. And those will be most appropriate for urban environments where there's a lot of stuff for the signals to kind of bounce off of, and that will change their polarization. So this thing can witness a couple more. But this isn't something where you should think like, oh my God, if I don't have the H antenna, I'm going to die. Like, it's not going to matter that much. In some environments, it's going to make a slight difference, and that's enough for me to put it in all my stuff. But don't feel like, oh my God, I'm missing out if I don't have it.
What's the primary benefit of LoRa sensors versus GPS sensors? Notice the Oysters are available in both versions: cost, battery life, functionality of them. I don't think it's just GPS and LoRa. I think it's more LoRa and like another type of backhaul. The GPS is notoriously power hungry. And so you want to limit your GPS. You want to make basically radio and GPS. You want to sleep these things as much as possible.
Yep.
The Oysters are very good as far as power consumption is concerned. The Oysters run on 3 AA's, and you use like Energizer, well, some type of lithium in there. And they will run for, I mean, at least mine have run a year and a half, and I run them hot. And when I say hot, I mean, when it's moving, because they have a motion sensor in them, right? And so when you're moving, I think I'm pushing every 5 seconds, which is very hot for, a tracking device, and probably not necessary, but a lot of that's just for testing. But a year and a half at that rate, not driving all the time, but they're quite good.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, the real big thing is just the whole thing is cheaper. It may not be as high fidelity, although it can be, but just it's a cheaper sensor. The battery life is way longer. When I'm charging my InReach Mini, which is a Garmin device about this big, I can reach for it and grab it over there. I'm charging that pretty much every other day or every other flight to make sure I've got enough for that flight. So that thing might last 8 to 12, might go a little bit longer hours. Where, like Travis, I got this thing in, I don't know, February. I haven't charged these at all, and it's still running just fine. So, that's a couple months. You've been running a year and a half on a higher data rate. So,
but cell phone radios or modems, they burn a lot more power than LoRaWAN. On a LoRaWAN sensor, you want it sleeping most of the time. It wakes up, it reads sensors, it throws its radio out, and then it goes back to sleep. And that's what you want to see happening. You don't want the thing awake, or you can't get that long-term battery life.
Let's see, is 300 meters still recommended in downtown high density environment using rack hotspot? I'm not sure what that question is. I mean, you basically don't want to be closer than 300 meters from any other miner, but I get it. Like you can't move where you are just to get, a better placement for your miner. So sometimes it's thinking about, okay, if I put it in here, how does that affect the hip 17 and hip 15 stuff? And then if I look into that and it's really going to affect me and others, maybe I find some other place to put it. I'm not sure if that answers that question, but that's as close as I can get, kind of guessing. Where can we find the Helium explanation write-up to give to potential hosts? I think I've got on the website. I give it to all the consultant clients who sign up with me. But if you need it, you can email me, nick@gristleking.com, and I'll link it to you. I want that to be open. I thought that was on, I think the blog post is called Anatomy of a Hotspot Placement, and it's on the Kick 13 site. So that's kyk13.com, and look for Anatomy of a Hotspot Placement. I think there's a link to that document there.
Someone's asking about swag, man.
Yep. No, it's not for sale. It only gets sent out to only gets sent out. I bought a couple hundred of them. I'll send them out, and then I don't know if we have enough interest, maybe I'll do a store. But I don't want to be in the clothing buying business. I had a t-shirt company a long time ago, and that's fun, but it's not this kind of fun. Let's see. Have you had building owners reference what they offered or heard that cell companies negotiate? Cell companies set up 10 to 15-year contracts with huge rentals regarding long-term. I thought it could be a discussion. Yeah, so think about this is the most important thing for you if you're going to do any kind of placement with a host is going to be the relationship you have with that host. So it's going to be all about how you guys interact. And I don't think for the most of these where you want to move really fast, right? For fairly obvious reasons. If we've got the halvening, we got a ton of sensors coming or a ton of gateways coming on, you want to move quickly, is you want to build the relationship first. And then once they understand what you're doing and they trust you and you trust them, then you can move super fast and not worry about a 10 or 15-year contract. What I tell all the building owners is, hey, I'm putting up a non-penetrating roof mount. If you don't like it, I'll pull it down the next day. It's because, think of it this way. On your end, you're kind of holding all the cards, is that you've got the thing that everybody wants, which is the gateway. The building owners, for them, it's an extra, some extra amount per month. And there's basically no cost for them to do it. You're going to install it. It's not going to penetrate anything. It's not going to, create any holes in the building envelope. And if they don't like it, they can say no. Like, man, that's a way better deal than cell companies. So
yeah,
maybe that helps.
They also went on, I think, on this comment to say that, when you're talking to a building owner, when you say, okay, look, these are sensors that you can get a $12 Dragino sensor that gives you door status.
Yep.
Or window status, or things that the building owner could implement into their building management system, which I think that's a good point. Can definitely be useful.
Ian, can I put it in the storeroom of the apartment that I rent out in Tower Block in the UK? Yeah, you can put a gateway in there. I mean, if you're burying it inside a building, it may not be able to penetrate out super far and see a bunch of other witnesses, but again, those HN antennas, they have an indoor version that you can put in there that's built specifically for that, for covering kind of the inside of a concrete building. They've done a bunch of work in hospitals with that stuff. So you can put it in there. It may not be a high HNT earner, but it may provide coverage. And that is, in the long term, that's going to be way more important. Can you please cover what installation is needed in the Paraglider? Just installation of an oyster? Yeah. You basically take this thing and you throw it in your backpack and you're done. Super, super simple. How many DC are you using on average when they're flying through the air? I don't know. If you have ever bought a Starbucks coffee, you're covered for like a year. I mean, that might be a slight exaggeration, but yeah, the DC is not going to be a huge cost. Restrictions on placement. What if you have a great setup and your next door neighbor starts a Helium hotspot? I think this is something I got asked a bunch, and I'm going to speculate here because it just makes sense to me. Is the way I see this going is, let's say you have a great hotspot placement and you've done your best to get it up way high. It's in your neighborhood. It's providing great coverage. It's doing what a hotspot's supposed to do. And one of your neighbors sees it and they said, I'm going to do the same thing. And they throw a hotspot in their window or in their garage inside. The network, any network, whether it's Helium or any other network, is going to see that and say, okay, hotspot A is providing crusher coverage and hotspot B is sucking. Who are you going to reward? If you think of this in terms of like, which hotspot do you want to do more of those kind of deployments? if I'm the network kind of manager, I'm going to reward the high performing hotspot. So what I see happening is, just like I said before, is that over time, the rewards for the higher earning hotspots are going to stay kind of steady or proportionally go up. And the rewards for the lower earning hotspots, the lower kind of coverage providing hotspots, are going to go down. That's my guess. That's not Helium's position. My name is @Gristle King, but Discord, if you just find the Helium server, it should be pretty easy to find.
Just go to chat.helium.com and
Nice.
I think that should kick you over there.
I'm seeing some people at Paragliders in Spain, like rock on, come fly San Diego. I'd love to come fly your stuff and see if we can track it. I'm super glad to see that you guys are using it. It's amazing. Let's see. Thanks a lot. Thank you guys. What do you wish you had time to do right now in this space? Obviously things you have to do, but what else do you want to see build? Edward. So Ed Blue, I know you. I think the long-term play for anyone getting into this space is figuring out how you deploy sensors. That, to me, that's clearly the thing to do, is to, if you want to build a long-term business out of this, if you want to figure out what's going on for the next couple of years, and this is, it breaks my heart a little bit because Helium's been so awesome, but no matter if Helium fails or succeeds, IoT in general and sensors in particular are going to be kind of the ticket for the next, let's say, 2 to 10 years if you want steady job opportunities, right? If you know how to measure anything out there in the world, whether it's the speed of grass growing, it's the level of water falling per rainfall, it's the number of cars going by on a highway, it's the number of people who walk into a store, it's the humidity inside, like any of those things. If you know how to do that, you are set. And so the thing I wish I had more time to do is to take like a 12-month course on basically learning what Travis knows. So that'd be where I'd spend most of my time. Is there a device for LoRa small like a tile? I haven't seen anything that small yet. Travis, you're
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, there's some very small devices. If you look up LoRaWAN NAT, like GNAT,
okay.
That's made or designed by a gentleman who does some very low power consumption LoRaWAN modules. And I would say that's one of the smaller ones I've seen. I don't have a link offhand here, but yeah, just look that up. There's also a grasshopper that he makes. So yeah, check it out. There's some small. I've got some small ones. I mean, that we could talk about sometime when I have another camera to kind of show these off and dig around with.
Sure, cool. So it's out there, and
they're out there absolutely. Okay. Because just the RFM 95s are. I mean, just this corner right there is the LoRaWAN radio. So my finger's all bloody. But,
that's so rad.
And so
it's tiny.
Yeah, very small. So there's another question here I wanted to come back on is how accurate is location tracking for LoRa devices compared to GPS? And I think that's maybe a misunderstanding there, because LoRa doesn't give you, I mean, there is a way with newer LoRaWAN gateways that do provide what is known as fine timing. And that allows you to have enough accuracy to do, I guess, kind of, time flight difference between receipt of transmission. Those are not in most gateways. Those are not in most hotspots on the market right now. They are, if you look up a Simtech trees, which are not on the street yet. I mean, a number of people have those out there, but you're going to have a fine timing device in order for that to be something you can build off of. Yes, it's going to happen. Yes, it will happen, hopefully sooner than later. But right now, it's not a replacement for GPS by any means.
Cool. So let me make sure I'm understanding that, because I hadn't got that nuance, is that there's a GPS unit in there, and what Helium is doing is reporting those GPS coordinates up to the blockchain, and that's going in.
So it's not actually like on the Oyster, that's got a GPS radio.
Got it. So there's no difference in accuracy. It's just kind of how fast it happens. And that's where the battery life comes from, is it may not in most cases. You've got it running every 5 seconds. I think these guys that I've got them set to is like every minute or maybe every 5 minutes. So you're not going to see the granularity, but for us, I just want to see, if you stop moving, where should I go to find you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's my big thing. What do you think about the idea to put LoRa in low Earth orbit? I mean, yeah, it sounds awesome. Go for it.
Yeah, we've actually on Hacks, there was a gentleman, Star Watcher from Discord, a couple of weeks back that he does high altitude balloons with Helium, and he's launching rockets off of those things. So watch the video, check it out. It's something that also We have a small satellite kit that was what kickstarted or Indiegogo'd, one of those things.
Yep.
That uses actually exactly that little radio chip I just showed you.
Yep.
And they're going to effectively throw that little board up into low Earth orbit. So, here, you throw this away.
Yep.
But,
Yeah, I think it speaks to how rad LoRa is that it can go really long distances. And this goes back a little bit to the antenna discussion where people say like, oh, I need a high gain antenna to go really long distances. That, I mean, you can use a stock antenna. I've got that H antenna working, so I know what the distance is, but it routinely hits 170-kilometer shot up into Los Angeles from down in San Diego. So a lot of that's over water. It's over the Pacific Ocean. The thing is up high, but that's a 4 dBi antenna. Like this obsession with higher gain antennas is basically it's not warranted, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, doesn't matter. Let's see. Planning to introduce it in a region in South America where no helium devices are now. Do you recommend starting with 2 or 3? I recommend starting with 5. 4 is the minimum that you need in order to earn optimally. You don't need more than 25. So, I mean, you got a budget, you got to stick within your budget. If 5 is not in your budget, that's how it goes. But if you think about taking those 5 and then putting them out where they provide coverage, the widest coverage possible, and where they can all see each other, that's where you're going to earn optimally and be providing great coverage. So that's kind of the very general strategy on how to do that. Dang, that's most of the questions. There's a bunch of comments in there, but I think
awesome.
That might wrap it up.
Well, good deal. And Nik, thank you so much for your time today, man. I've really enjoyed this chat and the presentation that you gave, man. Lots of cool stuff. And thank you everyone else for your time joining us on the Uplink. I hope you learned a thing or two here. And if you have any questions, I think we lost our slides. So I'll tell you what, when I get this put up onto YouTube, I'll contact links in the description there. And so you can get in contact with Nik about the Helium services and the that he offers, and links to Discord, Helium, whatnot. We'll get all that put up.
Right on. Yeah, it's super easy. KYK13.com, kick13.com is the website right now. So pretty easy to remember. And thanks a ton for having me on. Super good to share the information. I love how you guys have built this kind of really open source community where we can do it a couple different ways. So thank you.
Excellent. Nik, thanks a lot, man. I'll catch you later. Take care.
Let's.